Yeah, I mean, as you said, 14-2 in 2020, but of course that was just the big thing was the offensive line getting exposed in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes was sacked 3 times in the Super Bowl. He was hit 10 different times in the Super Bowl as well. And so what they did was go out and just completely redo that offensive line. Andy Reid in his 9th season. They bring back Eric Bieniemy. He's going to be running the offense. They bring back Steve Spagnuolo, who's going to be running the defense. So everything is in place there from a coaching standpoint. In the free agency, they go out. They get Joe Tunney. He is a guard. They get Jerron Reed, defensive tackle. They re-sign Mike Rimmers, who is one of the only good offensive linemen that they've had over the last couple of seasons. Signed safety Daniel Sorensen. They traded for Orlando Brown. They got 2 other offensive linemen back from opt-outs that were gone for COVID season. So should be better on that offensive line for them. In the draft, they didn't have a first-round pick. They had 2 second-round picks. Nick Bolton was a linebacker that they took in the second round. Then they took a center in Creed Humphrey, who is one of those offensive linemen that is actually slated to start for this team. So it looks like their second-round pick is going to step in and play center for them. They took a defensive end in Joshua Kandoa in the 4th round. They took a tight end, Noah Gray, in the 5th. And then they took a wide receiver in Cornell Powell in the 5th round that has actually been making, according to beat writers, and again, beat writers never come out and say, man, this guy's really terrible. What were they thinking about? Right. Why'd they draft this guy? But have come out and said he has looked really, really good, at least early on in camp here. And then in the 6th round, which is pretty interesting, with this offensive line woes that this team has, they took this guy, Trey Smith. He's a guard, again, in the 6th round, but he was a multi-year starter at Tennessee, who actually coming into the season had a much higher grade on him than 6th round, actually kind of in that, depending on who you're talking to, in that 2nd or 3rd round range. But he had blood clots in his lungs. Ooh. And he just plummeted down the draft board, right? So the guy that would have gone kind of 2nd, 3rd round ends up in the 6th. Well, his draft stock plummeting may end up helping out this Chiefs team here because, one, if he doesn't, depth for sure with him, but he might actually win a job on this offensive line as well. So they get a guy, they took kind of a flyer on there in the 6th round that may or may not turn out to be really, really good for them. A guy they could step in and really contribute. I mean, they were the number 2 offense DVOA last year. I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody, but they were number 22 on the defensive side of the ball. If you look at Football Outsiders, they have a mean projection of them of 10.5 wins. So if you look at their win total on the season, it's 12.5. And so the mean projection there from Football Outsiders projections is 10.5. They do have them winning 12-plus games, though, 37% of the time, has them making the playoffs 72% of the time, and a 9.2% chance to win the Super Bowl. Super talented roster, top to bottom. I mean, I don't think we need to tell you guys that. Number 2 overall roster in the NFL, according to ESPN. Our friend Warren Sharp over at Sharp Football, he actually does have them forecasted for 12.5 wins, but that's right on what the total is anyway for this team. And so I don't think there's a bet to be made on that win total on the over. If anything, probably on the under. If you look at Pro Football Focus, they're at 11.7 wins out of their 10,000 projections as well, simulations, I should say. So couple of big unders, and then a forecast from Sharp Football that's literally right on the number. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the schedule here is actually the 13th toughest in all of the NFL heading into this season. And so what everyone has figured out now is the way that you figure out how tough the schedule is going to be is you take the teams and what they're projected to do that season. And so as opposed to looking back on the record from the year before is what they're supposed to do this year. And what that pans out to is the Chiefs having the 13th toughest schedule. So harder than the average schedule in the NFL. Pro Football Focus still loves them, has them number 1 power ranked team entering the season, a 14% chance to win the Super Bowl, which is just absurd, 14% probability. But the big thing here is they redid this offensive line, which is going to really be good for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they released Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. They go out, as I mentioned, they traded for Orlando Brown, who has actually gotten better in each of the last 4 seasons for him. They re-signed Mike Rimmers, who actually graded out as a 71.3 for them. And so getting him back, huge signing, as I said. Joe Tunney is a top 10 guard each of the past 3 seasons. Signed him to a huge contract of $16 million a year. Kyle Long unretired. I think we remember this happening, like it happened whenever he unretired. He got hurt about a month ago. And so what that's going to do is he's going to now kind of be in a battle for that right guard position with a few different guys. But all of which are better than the options that they had last year. So it still should increase and make this offensive line better no matter what. A guy, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, is one of their offensive linemen who actually opted out last year. But he was a 5-year starter for the team, and so he would actually kind of be battling out there with Kyle Long for that right guard spot. And as I mentioned,
doctor too,
opted out to treat COVID patients in Canada, I believe.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, that second rounder, Creed Humphrey, is going to start at center for them. He's a 3-year starter at Oklahoma. The real issue is not going to be the offense, as you would imagine, for the Chiefs team, but it's on the defense and the defensive line in particular. So Chris Jones is an absolute stud and has been fantastic in every year that he's been there. He's earned a pass rushing grade of at least 90 in each of the past 3 seasons. Only Aaron Donald is the other player in the NFL that can say that. And the only defensive lineman with a higher WAR than Jones were Aaron Donald and Cam Hayward. So you just let you know what you have in Chris Jones, just an absolute stud on that defensive line. But then after that, you look like they have a ton of money locked up in Frank Clark, who was great earlier on in his career and has been really bad since he's been with the Chiefs. Graded out 2 years ago at 63.3, this past season at 54.3, and again, for comparison purposes, like we just said, Chris Jones graded out over 90 the last 3 seasons. Frank Clark has really underperformed that huge contract, and maybe he's just on the bad side of his career and don't really know if you can look for him to get much better. So they did go outside Jerron Reed in the free agency. He did have 9 sacks last year. If he can kind of bring some of that pressure in, maybe take a little bit of the pressure off of Chris Jones, could help out there. But I mean, it's really going to come down to what they can do on the defensive line, defensive side of the ball, if this team can really just rocket and moon, because we expect them to be great. I mean, we expect them to be a really, really good team. But if we're talking like, will they go down as one of the super elite teams that we ever remember, it's probably going to come down to what happens on the defensive line for them, because the offense is certainly going to be there.